All right, so we start off our second half with the question, what is communication? Now, we talked a little bit about communication last night. We're going to get more into it tonight. There's a couple of things that we want to establish before we go forward. The first is the definition. What is the definition of communication? If you look at the American Heritage Dictionary, the first definition is the exchange of thought, messages, or information as by speech, signals, writing, or behavior. Right? This could be through text messages, vocal expression, smoke signals, Morse code, whatever. Different ways of expressing yourself. This is communication, right? The second definition is interpersonal rapport. Do you know what rapport is? So basically an exchange of things, okay? The art and technique of using words effectively to impart information or ideas. It's an art, right? So, points of focus. Communication is an exchange, right? When you talk to a person, when you engage with a person with communication, you are exchanging information, right? Sometimes it's little by little. When you're having a conversation about things, oftentimes you're talking about a particular topic or whatever, and you're going back and forth based off of the knowledge that you have of that particular topic. Or if you're imparting some knowledge to someone, like a teacher might be talking to a person, but gets information back, and so this back and forth exchange is rapport, right? Communication involves information, right? Information is exchanged. It's an art. Some people are really good at it, others not so much. Me, I'm not good at it. I'm good in a situation where I'm just talking to people. There's no back situation. I'm just, like a lecture kind of situation. One of the biggest issues I have with communication with my wife is I can't get what's up here out in a way that I think it is correct or is accurate. I can't accurately express myself in words. So I have to sit there and I have to write it out so that I can get my thought process correct, and then I go and talk to my wife and be like, okay, this is the situation. I have to literally write it out first. So there's different ways of doing it. Anyway, involves technique. This is something that, if you met me about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I did not know how to talk to people, right? It was a situation where communication or conversations that I would have with people would be, where are you from? How old are you? Where do you work, or where do you go to school? After that, it got awkward because I didn't know where to take the conversation. And it was like, okay. And so I didn't like conversation. I didn't like dealing with people because meeting new people was not a fun experience for me. It was a very awkward experience. However, over the years, I have learned how to communicate with people, how to talk to people. Because what you do is, just real quick, what you do is a situation where when you ask a question, listen to what they have to say and pick up on certain points. Like, where are you from? Person will say, I'm from this place, this region and this place or this city or whatever. Okay, well, can you tell me something about the region? Something about the town, What are some imports, exports, things like this? You can take the information that's given and build more information from that. And then once you exhaust that train of thought, then you come back and deal with the next one. And then you ask your next question, well, where do you work? And then they say, oh, well, I work at this place, like this place. Well, what position do you work in? What's your position in that particular company? What do they do? What do they sell? What do they, And there's all sorts of different questions you can ask based upon that. But that took practice. For years and years of practice, years of being in an awkward situations, learning how to deal with, learning to go from being awkward to not being awkward. Communication can be effective if done correctly. I don't know why that's like that. That shouldn't be like that. There's some hidden stuff there. So, a lesson from Cebuano. Yeah, see, it's all I'm just going to put this up there because that's supposed to be the... So we have different words in Cebuano that talk about different ways to communicate, right? We have pagsulti, speaking, right? Paghisgot is a discussion. So speaking, and then there's discussing a situation. There's a topic, and we're going back and forth in that kind of situation. There's paghistoria, right? I'm telling you something. There's not input from you. This is just me giving you information, right? Pagpatinaw. It's an explanation, right? Explaining how something works or things like this, right? And lantugi, it's a debate kind of situation. You take a stance, I take a stance, and we try to convince each other that we're right. Right? Basically. So there's different ways to communicate. There's different types of communication that you can use in order for you to go about talking to people. These are all types of communication that can be appropriate in certain circumstances, right? Sometimes I just need to give you information. Sometimes we need to have a discussion about something, right? My wife and I, in our situation, our marriage situation, there's always discussion going on. I present a situation, or she presents a situation, and then we get one side, we get the other side, and we talk about the situation, and then we make decisions and make conclusions based off of the information that we have, right? There's nonverbal communication. If you think about it, if you receive text messages, I don't like receiving text messages, especially if somebody's mad at me. Or even if they're not mad at me, because sometimes it looks like they're mad because they use capital letters and stuff, and you're like, are you yelling at me? Did I do something wrong? You don't really know. And you can't really tell how they feel when they say this statement, right? Unless there's like the inflections of the voice and the tone, how the tone works, and facial expressions are another thing. Eye contact, gestures, right? Gestures and timing, the timing of the situation, right? If I tell you a joke over text, sometimes the timing is gone, right? Sometimes it's the presentation that makes it funny, right? Other times it just falls flat because, right? And so if I were to say a sentence, and you read that, you might read it one way, you might read it another way, you might read it even a different way. Some people may think, oh, I'm excited, or I'm happy, I'm sad. There's no real clear way of expressing yourself through text. So nonverbal communication, when I talk to someone, you look at my face, there's certain key things you can pick up on. Like, my eyes, are they happy, are they sad, are they mad, are they, different things like this. My expressions, my tone of voice. These are all the different things that are important to pick up on when you're talking to a person. This is why if you have problems that you're dealing with, it is best to deal with these face to face, because you need these things. Because if I say something, it can be misrepresented if I just send you a text, right? If I just send you a text, I'm upset, or I'm mad because of this, or whatever, right? Well, how mad am I? Well, you won't really know because there's no facial expressions or things like this that are included in this. I may be mad, or I may be mad, you never really know. So there's a lot of things to consider, right? The challenges of communication, perspective. Gender. Women think differently than men. Men are simple creatures. Men are very literal. If I say there's nothing wrong, I promise you there's nothing wrong. Right? If I say everything's great, everything's great. If women say everything's great, everything's not great. And see, the fact that you guys are laughing, you know what I'm talking about. And see, so there's different perspectives. Women have certain perspective on life, and men have certain perspective on life. And so when you're dealing with things or talking about things, you're talking it from your own perspective. One of the things that I've had to learn over the years, especially with my experience of counseling and communicating with people, is I've had to try to get into the mind of the other person. Now, I've talked to some of you about this, but trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes is a very important part of communication, because if you don't understand where they're coming from, the background of like, say for example, your wife comes to you with a problem. Why is this a problem? What did I do? What were the circumstances behind this? and why has it become a problem? These are some pieces of information that you would need in order to really understand where my wife is coming from, right? And once I understand where she's coming from, then I can look at the situation and express where I'm coming from in this argument or this discussion or whatever it is, and that's important, right? So there are a lot of things to consider. Cultures is another thing. Like I said, I am very my marriage is a multicultural relationship, and there are cultural things that come up. Not so much now that we're older, but like in our early years, there were a lot of things that we had to deal with, cultural differences and stuff. Because like I said, I grew up in an American house, and in the house we did things the American way of things, right? So my culture, even though I grew up here, I'm kind of like a cross-cultural child, I guess. I grew up in the Philippine culture, so I'm partly Philippine culture, but at the same time, I'm partly American culture. I don't fit in over there. I really don't fit in over here, so I really don't fit in, you know? And that's part of the reason why I was a loner and all that stuff. Anyway, education. Sometimes the education level is different, you know? Person who's really educated may not know how to talk to someone who's not that educated, or vice versa, right? So another thing, ability to express oneself. And this goes back to what I was saying, Ganina. I don't know how to express myself. Even after so many years of having to do this, I have a difficult time expressing myself in a way that expresses it the way I'm thinking it. I can't go from here to out there like that. I have to sit down and have to think about it. Oftentimes I have to write this out so that I can understand my thought processes and figure out how do I express this in a way that does the situation justice and also makes it to where she can understand me. So things like that. Motive. Situations for motive. Let's see, did I jump ship? Oh, there we go. Even though you may not like something that happened, sometimes people will hold back bringing the issue back up until they have an advantage, right? So like say for example, I did this and my wife didn't like it, but she's not going to mention anything about it right now. So later on, when I do something bigger, she'll bring that back in to compound the situation, so she has the advantage in the argument or discussion or whatever. Now that's not cool. That's not the right way to do it, right? Another thing is leveling. What do you mean by leveling? This is the way you talk to the person in order to bring them down, or to you know, ridicule. I can't think of the words right now, but there's the way you speak to your spouse or the way you speak to your friend or things like this. The idea of leveling is just sometimes people complain or they argue just so they can bring the other person down, emotionally, mentally, whatever. Another thing, method. The way something is brought up, and here's something that I've learned over the years. The way you bring up an argument or a discussion or a concern or a complaint is key. It directly correlates to how the situation will play out. If I have an issue with my wife and I say, babe, I don't like what you've done. You did something that really hurt me and this and that. What happens? Her defenses come up and there's no way we can deal with this in a easy manner. Diba? So the way you approach a situation, okay, I have an issue. I need to talk to my wife about this. Bringing it up right this minute while it's going on is not necessarily the best location to do it. I take my wife after I've cooled down. I'm upset right now, but after I cool down, I think about it for a while. I come back to the situation and be like, babe, I realized that you did this earlier, and I want you to know that I really didn't appreciate it. You know, there's ways to talk about things. Don't be confrontational, because that only brings up walls, and walls are very hard to bring down, right? Being preached to or criticized or attacked, this is not a good method to deal with problems. If you're like, oh, you did this all the time, no, that's not right. That just brings up the walls, and next thing you know, the person has toned you out. You're not even getting through to them, right? Thinking that you're important as opposed to your spouse or your partner, right? That's not the way. So the way a conversation is carried out more often determines its degree of success than the actual content. You know? The way you approach the situation. If you have any... do you know what a diplomat is? What is a diplomat? How do they work? Oftentimes there are conflicts between countries or things like this, and a diplomat's job is to kind of be the go-between to address both situations so that both sides come out in a positive situation. Diba? They know how to speak. They know how to talk. They know how to address problems. This is a skill that you learn. Some people are really good at it, but others have to learn it over time. I had to learn it over time. And it was a situation where if there is a conflict, don't be quick to talk. Stop and think first. Think it through, process the situation. Then once you understand what's going on, get both sides of the story, then you can approach the situation with a clear head, and your chances of success go up rather quickly, right? But if you are hot-headed and you react, that will not help the situation. It would just make it even worse. As far as in marriage, God does the talking, right? Through his model, our roles set up limits. So there are limits to the things that we can do, how far we can go. Diba? It's not a democracy. Remember, we're dealing with God's model here, not ours. Remember the Garden of Eden situation. Okay? Where we have the different roles and stuff. Earthly cultures no longer matter. Cultural conflicts and things, they shouldn't be an issue anymore. Why? Because we're no longer of this world. We're Christians. We are God's people, and we follow God's model in things. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. All under submission to Christ. Right? Submit to one another out of fear of Christ. No exceptions. So it's just basic Christianity. If you look at the marriage relationship and you look at Christianity, how Christianity is supposed to work, the relationship between a husband and a wife is just basic Christianity. You look at the teachings that Christ gives, those things apply in the marriage relationship. Okay? The only real difference is you and your spouse have a special connection that no one else has. All right? Do you know what the word empathy means? What's the difference between the word empathy and the word sympathy?
Empathy has to do with feeling something for someone even if you haven't experienced it. Sympathy is feeling the same thing because you know what it feels like.
Everybody agree with that? So empathy has to do with, like say for example, your house burned down. If my house burned down and you have never experienced your house burning down, which one is it? Do you have empathy for me or sympathy?
Empathy.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Sympathy.
I don't think that's right. We'll see.
Sympathy, you have to experience, you put yourself in the person's
Let me do something here. Which,
maybe I'm mixing it up.
yeah, that's what I think you're mixing it up. Now that I'm confused, I think empathy. Empathy has to do, okay, so empathy has to do with you know what it's like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sympathy is you don't know what it's like, but you can imagine it. Okay? That's what I thought it was. You got me confused. So, the idea here is this. We have to approach this situation from empathy, right? I know what it's, I know the struggles of being a Christian. I know what it's like, and I know she has the same struggles and such. And so when I approach a situation, I know what she's going through. She knows what I'm going through. And so we need to understand where we're at from this. I suffer. She suffers, right? Deeper than sympathy, which is suffering with someone, right? She and I are partners. We are going through this together. It's not something, the whole family situation, the whole issues of finances, the whole issue of, education for the kids, raising the kids, and all these kinds of stuff. It's not me against her. It's us against everything else, right? We're partners in this. I can empathize with her in this situation because I'm not alone, right? This is putting yourself in place of another person, the idea of empathy, right? The Christian husband or wife, we're both Christians, right? Consider the context of Colossians chapter 3. Look at Colossians chapter 3. We looked at that before, right? Ephesians chapter 4. These are all talking about this idea, we put on, we put off. Put off the old way and put on Christ. We act like Christ. We do the things that are taught in the scriptures about Christ and the things that he's said, right? So what are the goals? The goals in communication are understanding, not agreement. I don't have to agree with you, but I want you to understand my side, and I need to understand your side before I can make an informed decision. As the husband in the family, as the one responsible for the success or failure of this family, it's on my shoulders as the husband and my responsibility. I'm answerable to God for this, right? It's when we have a situation where there's a conflict or there's a need or whatever it is, I need my wife to talk to me. I need to talk to my wife. We need to come to an agreement with this. But ultimately, the final decision rests with me because that's my God-given role. But I have to answer for that decision. Whether I made a correct decision or an incorrect decision, that's on me, not on her. So, what's the difference between pagsabot and pag-uyon? What's the difference, though? Did I say it wrong? Okay, pagsabot. Emphasis on the end. Okay, so I said it wrong. Pagsabot. Anyway, so what's the difference? What's pagkauyon? Okay, so this is understanding versus agreement, right? They're two different words, two different contexts. They're used in two different ways. Yeah? Okay? See, here's the thing. When it comes to a conflict or a confusion or an issue, the goal of communication doesn't matter what context we're in. Doesn't matter if it's a debate. It doesn't matter if it's two buddies talking or whatever, two girlfriends or whatever. It doesn't matter whatever the situation is. The goal is not agreement. The goal is understanding. Communication's goal, the ultimate goal, is for me to impart information to you so that you understand where I'm coming from, and then you imparting information to me so that I understand where you're coming from. And now we're in a situation where either I make a choice. Either I agree with you or you agree with me. Or we agree with something else, right? But the agreement is not the goal. The understanding is the goal. The agreement is voluntary. So conversion must be voluntary and based on the merits of the explanation. If my explanation makes more sense in this situation, then you are free to agree with that. But the agreement is probably going to be more towards the better explanation, usually, right? See, I don't have to agree with you to accept and follow or do what you want me to do. I don't have to agree with it, but I do understand where you're coming from, and therefore we're going to do it. I still don't agree. I don't have to agree, right? If I understand, it is easier for me to accept and follow, right? Now, another thing, consideration is not ultimatum. What does that mean? Just because I disagree does not mean I'm trying to convert you or that I will not follow your decision. If I must decide something, then I must be free to do that. You can't just say, we're going to do this, and you don't have a choice. Right? You agree with me or else. No, that's not how that works, right? My wife may not like my decisions. She doesn't have to agree with my decisions, but, she needs to be free to make the decisions, whether she agrees with it or not. Diba? Even if you must make the decision, I might want to tell you what I think so that you will know and possibly consider my feelings and opinions on the matter. Why do I talk to my wife? Why don't I just make an arbitrary decision? Because I need to know where she's coming from. And oftentimes, I'll give you this. Oftentimes, when a situation comes up and I have a decision that I have to make, and in my mind, I've already made a decision. If I go and talk to my wife, oftentimes having a second opinion about something or a different perspective on things can actually help me to understand the situation better. And so in the situation, I may not change my mind, but her opinion or her input into this conversation helps me to look at things from a different perspective, right? And that's a good thing. That's a healthy relationship, right? And she may not agree with what I'm saying, but now I'm in a position where my decision is made from a better platform, a better position to look at this. You know what I'm saying? So those are things to consider, right? If I'm allowed to speak my mind, even if we don't agree, it is easier for me to accept and follow what you want, right? Like if I don't take her opinion at all, her having to accept my decisions is not going to be an easy thing for her. But if I give her the option to give her the opportunity to express herself and to give her input on the situation, after we've talked about it and after we've gone back and forth with this, me finally making the decision, she has an easier time accepting that decision, whether she likes it or not. She has an easier time accepting that decision because at least I heard her out. At least I considered her side of the story or her opinion about the situation. Now, it's not always going to be a situation where I don't agree with her. And my decision making is not always my decision making cannot be from my own opinion. I have to look at this from a perspective of how is this going to benefit the family? Is it beneficial for the family? If it is, great. If it's not, we need to not do it. Even though she feels strongly about we should do this, maybe it's not what's best for the family. And if I make that decision, she needs to support that decision. Does that make sense? And as long as my focus is not my own personal situation or my personal gain or my personal needs or wants or whatever, but my focus is on what's best for the family based on the things that we see in the scriptures, then she can understand, she can accept that much easier as the woman in the relationship. Does that make sense? So the goal is to uphold God's model in my life, right? The model speaks the same things to all people of all genders and in all times and cultures. It doesn't matter what culture you come from. The model's the same, right? God created a family unit, created a model for the family unit. Remember, there used to only be one group of people. But then the Tower of Babel came out, and next thing you know, now there's many different languages, many different cultures, and all those things evolved over the years and things like this, but we all came from the same place, right? The whole family unit was created before all of that happened. The norms of basic Christianity must still respect the special designation God places in his family. Men and women must never place earthly models above God's model. Earthly models don't always work. Some might work better than others, but God's model is the ideal. Why? Because that's how he created the family unit in the first place. He created it and it expected it to work this way. And if everybody does this and works it this way using his model, then it doesn't matter what issue might come up. You can always work things out. If I'm not being fairly treated, God provides a process for me to find fairness. Matthew 18. If you have an issue, that person's not doing right, you go to that person, you talk to that person. If they don't change, you bring a couple of people. You talk to that person. If it still doesn't change, you bring the church and you talk to that person. If it still doesn't change, then yes. But there's a process. There's a process, right? when things go wrong, only by reverting back to God's model can we restore what is lost. Okay? Doesn't matter what kind of situation happens. As long as we stick to the model and we follow the instructions and the examples that we see in the scriptures, can everything work out. So guidelines for effective communication. Number 1, maintain a good day-to-day relationship. I see my wife every day, but there are times of the day that I'm not there at home. I'm here at the office, or I'm working, or I'm traveling, or I'm doing stuff, right? My wife's out of town right now. She'll be gone for the next couple of days. She'll be back on Monday. Not a fun time for me. Because we always interact with each other every single day. In fact, after we get done with this, I'm going to go home and we're going to talk on video for a while. Because, there's this interaction that if you don't interact with your spouse or you don't interact with your children, then the relationship can break down rather easily. So maintain good day-to-day relationships. Make certain that the real you is God-centered. Don't be fake. Right? It will make your spouse more sensitive to your needs and your desires. The closer you are to a person, the higher the chance of them being there for you. For example, let's say we're not talking about this example is not from a spouse relationship kind of situation. This is just knowing people. Let's say, for example, someone comes to you and says that they need money for medicine or things like this, right? First thing you can think about is, do I really know this person? Depending on the close relationship. If they're very close, the tendency for you to help them out is quite high. But if you don't know the person, then the tendency for you to help is actually quite low. The closer your relationship, sometimes you have a relationship that doesn't matter what you need, I'm there, no problem, right? You need a blood transfusion? Here. Go ahead, take what you need, no problem, right? But that only happens in a good relationship kind of situation. I would do that for my wife and kids. I would do that for my parents and my sisters, possibly my brother-in-laws. But see, the closer you are to these people, the more likely you are to help out. The more. So that's why I say, the closer you are to your spouse, it makes your spouse more sensitive to your needs and your desires. It will lessen the frequency and intensity of conflict, right? If there's conflict, if you have a good relationship with your spouse, you'll actually deal with conflict rather quickly. The sooner you deal with conflict, the better. What I mean by that is this: the longer you wait to deal with conflict, the harder it is to resolve. Okay? If you are angry with someone and you don't deal with it quickly, that anger will fester and get to the point where I like to imagine it like this. When I was a kid, when we would go to the Carbon Market, right? They had these bags, these mesh bags that were like blue and yellow and different color, which colors, right? They were mesh bags, right? And so we would put our vegetables and stuff in that, right? Now, in this analogy, imagine that bag, okay? So when you get angry or when you get upset about something, imagine putting like tomatoes or something in that bag, and you're holding that bag, and this is how you deal with that, right? The longer it stays there, and the more stuff gets put in it, like tomatoes are not very strong, so if there's a lot of pressure on it, it'll just go everywhere, right? But tomatoes also rot rather quickly, rather easily. And the longer you hold on to it, it starts to rot, it starts to fester, it starts to get slimy, the smell starts to permeate in the area. And it's like that. So like the sooner you deal with the issues, the sooner you remove those tomatoes from the bag, the cause of the anger, the cause of the issues and things like this, the easier it is to clean up. But the longer it stays in the bag, now you've got all that stuff dripping all over you, and you have just this whole mess that you have to clean up. You know what I mean? You understand the analogy in that? Yeah. So the sooner you deal with the problem, the easier it becomes. It limits spouses' hesitancy to come to you with a complaint when it's still something small. If you deal with conflicts in a proper way, then the likelihood of your spouse coming to you when the problem is small. See, oftentimes what happens is we don't know about the problems until the spouse snaps. Until something happens that breaks the straw that breaks the camel's back, or whatever that saying is. It's usually the issues have piled up so much that it all comes out at once. That's not a healthy relationship. The more you deal with these problems in a proper way, the more likely your spouse is going to come to you while the problems are small. Okay? It will make it easier for large blunders that might occur during conflict to be placed into perspective. Discuss difficulties when there's small matters, right? Courtship is designed to be a time of getting to know one another. However, what we see in modern times, it's not that way at all. When I was a kid, my dad told me when I was starting to get interested in pursuing women was, don't ever date someone that you would not consider marrying. If you look at that person and you like, for example, one of the things that was on my list of requirements was the person needed to be a Christian, right? When I first met my wife was not a Christian. I didn't have any interest in potentially pursuing her, right? But we became friends. We talked about stuff, and I enjoyed talking to her, but there was never any, it was not a situation of, what do they say, love at first sight? No, that wasn't the thing. That's not a real thing, right? Infatuation is different. Love is agape. Love is not, it's not that kind of thing. Courtship is designed to get to know a person. The time where you spend with each other, this time period is the time period that you need to use to figure out if this is really the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. Right? The problem that we have with the courtship situation nowadays is people are fake. You're always on your best behavior. Your teeth is brushed, you smell real nice and things like this. You get married, you're in your honeymoon, the morning you wake up, oh, bad breath, oh, body odor. Whoa, who is this? No makeup, what's going on? You understand? It's crazy. But the idea here is, courtship is designed to be a time where you get to know each other. You spend time with one another. I enjoyed spending time with my wife. I really did. And I still do, right? But there are things about her that I didn't know that I found out after we got married. So that's why I said, was it last night or the night before? The person I married is not the person I ended up with. But the person I dated is not the person I married. I can't remember what exactly I said. Anyway, in marriage, matters that come up should be discussed openly when they are discovered. If you can deal with problems in your courtship, you can deal with problems in your marriage, right? If you find a person that you can easily, because there are going to be conflicts. It doesn't matter how nice you are and how romantic things are and whatnot in your courtship. There are going to be issues, and how you deal with those issues, how you communicate in those situations, is a big tell about how the future is going to be. So here's something that's important. Another guideline is create a set of guidelines for dealing with conflict. Wives often feel disadvantaged at times of conflict. Why? Well, because ultimately it's the husband's final decision, right? Here's where it's important. Never try to deal with a problem at the heat of the moment. Something comes up, don't deal with it at the heat of the moment. Okay? And here's why. When the emotions are going, when the emotions are high and things like this, it is hard for you to think rationally. This is oftentimes where spouses will say something that they regret. Okay? I've done it. I know what I'm talking about. I've done it. Okay? When emotions are high, I get upset about something. There are times where I would say something that I wish I didn't say. or hadn't said. So how do we deal with that? Well, in a situation where something happens like this, I don't say anything. I take a step back, I walk away, and I think about it. I calm down, I breathe, and I think about the situation and try to see in my mind where she's coming from and where I'm coming from. Is my being upset a valid thing? Or is this just me being selfish? Right? And then when there's a time where everything is peaceful, there's no conflicts or things like this, that's the time I bring it up. Why? Because both of us are level-headed and we've both had a chance to think about the situation. Because I guarantee you, if there's a situation that comes up and we have a disagreement or an argument about something, and then I walk away, I don't walk away, but we try to talk about it a little bit, and then we walk away for a while, I guarantee you, while I'm thinking about it, she's also thinking about it. Because that's something that's bugging her. We haven't had a resolution yet, right? So we talk about that situation at a time where we're both level-headed. Those times are the best times to deal with problems. So during peacetime agreements will make dealings with conflict times easier because you won't have to debate over fair procedures in the heat of battle. If you come up with guidelines for how to deal with a problem before it becomes a problem, then when the time comes, you know what to do. So here's some suggested guidelines. Remember, the primary goal of discussion will be understanding. When you have a conflict, doesn't matter what conflict it is, if you have a conflict, your goal is not to convert. Your goal is to understand the other person's side. Okay, secondary goal is to find and constructively deal with the issues that are causing the conflict. Remember, dealing with the symptoms will not fix the problem. You have to find the core problem and deal with the issue directly. Each person has the right to be heard in turn without interruptions. If there's a conflict, you can't just be doing this back and forth. One person has the time where they get to say everything that they want to say. When they are done, then the other person gets their time and this person needs to be quiet. And doing this back and forth, no interrupting. Get everything that you want to say out, and then give your spouse the opportunity to say their piece. That way, all the information can be received on both sides, and the resolution can begin. Because once I understand her side of the story, and she understands my side of the story, we now have the full picture of what's causing the issue. So many relationships are destroyed because spouses don't do this properly. You cannot imagine the number of counseling sessions that I've had where the biggest issue came about because of a misunderstanding and a lack of communication. During the discussion, each spouse will be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Remember, the goal here is not to prove your point. The goal here is to understand the other person's situation. Right? Yeah, you may think your situation is valid, but you have to understand that you're an individual. There are different perspectives that you have to look at here. Your spouse has a perspective, you have a perspective, and so you need to look and see where are they coming from and where are you coming from and how are they conflicting? What's the issue here? And as long as both sides do this, any problem can be resolved. While each spouse has the right to question the other about their fulfilling their role in the model, no person has the right to question the model itself or hold hostage with ultimatums. For example, no sex for you unless you do what I say. That's wrong. Okay? Don't do it. Issues must be focused upon complaints and not criticisms. Neither spouse has the right to say that what the other is Neither spouse has the right to say that what the other is concerned about is foolish. Because the fact that they're bringing it up means it's important. And if you just think it's foolish that they're having this issue, that's not fair and that's not right. And the chances of them doing this in the future become less and less. Right? Don't just write off what they're trying to say. If it's been brought up, it means that this is something that's important to them, important enough that they break their norm. My norm, especially if I bring it up, I have gone against my normal routine of trying to avoid conflict. And the fact that I am bringing this to the table means that this is something that I feel is important. And if Gina decides it's not important enough to address, then that's a low blow to me, because she doesn't think that my feelings matter, and that's unfair, and that's not right. That's not a good relationship kind of situation. Okay? No person has the right to hold any position just because. There has to be a reason. If you have an issue, if you take an issue with me because of something I did, there needs to be a reason. You can't just say, just because. That's not fair. If you're mad, there has to be a reason why you're mad, and you need to be willing to tell me why you're mad. Because if I don't know why it is you're mad, how can I fix the problem? Or how can we work out the problem? Just because is not enough. You must be willing to explain why you feel the way you do. Past issues that have been dealt with and forgiven cannot be brought back to the current discussion, even if the discussion is a repeat situation. If we've had to deal with this in the past, and it's in the past, and we resolved it, and we've made up, and there's no issue anymore, never ever bring those things back, because those things are in the past. Right? You can't hold it over my head. Right? Something I did, something I said, you can't hold it over my head if we've already dealt with it. It's not fair. Right? Neither can walk away unless by agreement both parties, and only after mutual agreement to resume the discussion is set in the future time. We start an argument, I walk away because I don't want to deal with it. No, you can't do that. Talk about it. I realize you're upset. I'm upset too. Let's take a break for a second. Come back in about an hour. We'll talk about this. Both sides agree? Okay, that's the time you walk away. Never ever walk away just because. Okay? I don't like conflict. And so there are times in my early relationship with my wife, she get mad, I walk away because I don't want to deal with it. Don't ever do that, because it will never get resolved. Because every time she tries to bring it up, I just walk away. No, that's not the way to deal with it. Have the courage to deal with the problem. But if you are upset, if I am like if the emotions are high and things like this, I don't want to deal with the problem now because I'm afraid that I might say something bad, which I've done in the past, right? So in this situation, I realize you have an issue. I'm upset right now. You're upset right now. Let's take a short break. Come back in an hour. And I go go somewhere where she's not, so I can think about things. I go walking, or I go do something. But then we come back and agree to deal with this situation. But you have to deal with it. Don't let the sun go down on your anger and all that. If we have an issue, we have a rule that we can't go to bed until we talk about this. Right? Because if we go to bed, it just compounds. The next day's issues, next day. And so then all of a sudden, it's very hard to deal with. What are we doing on time? Ooh. Let's see. We're getting close to the end. Okay. Each spouse must watch out for the state of the well-being of their mate. If he or she perceives the spouse has become overstressed by what is being discussed, must call for a timeout and allow for a recovery. If I see that my wife is getting super stressed about the situation, and I realize maybe this discussion needs to take a break for a little bit, because there are times where that happens. We'll go back and forth, and emotions, even if we start out in a calm situation, the emotions can come back and get high, and I realize this is stressing her out. I usually will end up in a situation where I'll be like, okay, let's take a short break. I realize we're starting to become emotional again. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back again and do this. Right? Having that kind of consideration makes it easier for us to deal with it next time. No matter what's brought up, no matter that is brought up, no matter that is brought up for discussion will be left unresolved. If you do this, if you leave it unresolved, it's just going to get worse and get worse and compound and compound. And the more you do this, the more you delay it, it's never going to get resolved. Other things are going to happen. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. In times of stress, more than any other time, remember who you are. You're God's children, right? You are the light of the world, salt of the earth, the aroma of Christ. Your spouse is watching your example, just like everybody else is watching your example. Children, your family members, your fellow Christians, outsiders, your Father in heaven is also watching you. A lot of problems with children can be traced back to actions of parents. You have to be careful what you do, what you say in the presence of your children. The way you react to each other, the way you deal with conflict, the way you show affection and things like this can be seen by your children. And remember, 1 Corinthians 10:13. No situation will ever be more than what you can handle. Right? You always have a choice. You promise God that you will be different. Your spouse is the other half of the only one flesh that you have in this world. Never forget that the marriage relationship is designed to be a relationship between a brother and a sister in Christ. And so the basic teachings of Christ form the foundation of this relationship, just as they do every other relationship. Doesn't matter what relationship you're dealing with. This is the foundation. Because remember, it's God's message. No one has the right to change it, right? And if he says, this is how I expect my children to live, and in a marriage relationship, it's basically just two of his children deciding to team up and work together to raise a family and things like this, then in reality, the teachings that we see in the scriptures about Christian life is the same teachings that we abide by in our married life and the way we raise our children. That's the model, right? So, I mean, there's a lot more to talk about in the marriage relationship, or not in the marriage relationship, but like in the family situation. Like I said, there's things about child raising. There's things about, how do I deal with conflict? There's things like, how do I deal with financial difficulties? How do I deal with emergency situations? Stuff like that. And we talk about all that kind of stuff in this course. But for tonight, that's it. I think we have enough time for maybe a couple of questions. Anybody have any questions pertaining to this topic? Go ahead.
My question is not because I'm married, but with regards to divorce, we've been discussing the differences. Mm-hmm. What is it?
Irreconcilable differences. Yeah.
What if the issue is psychological?
Well, see, here's the thing about the marriage relationship. As long as both parties, their foundation is the same, then there's a way to work it out. The issue is when one person's a Christian and another person's not. How do you deal with that situation? They're going to do whatever they want because they don't have the same foundation you do. Now, in a situation where a husband is causing psychological issues to the wife or vice versa, there are procedures. You address that situation. If they don't change, then you bring a couple of people to help with that situation. If they still don't change, you bring the whole congregation into the issue. If they still don't change, then it's better to separate for a while. But remember this, when you made that commitment, that whole one flesh idea, God doesn't break that. It doesn't automatically mean that you're done, right? So what do you do in that situation? Well, our cultures tell us that, well, I mean, if it's not a good match, then just divorce and find someone else. But what does the Bible tell us? That whole one flesh doesn't stop just because you separate.
No, even if the other person is diagnosed
What do you mean diagnosed?
There's a diagnosis that is cuckoo.
Well, like I said,
Mentally ill.
I understand. I get that. But honestly, I don't know how to deal with that
Yeah.
situation. They have a problem. They need to get help, right? And as the spouse, you need to be able to get them the help that they need, and be there for them, and you know, whatever that situation. Because remember, it's not a situation where it's sickness and in health, till death do us part kind of thing. It's not yes, unless you go crazy and then you're on your own, or yes, until you get into a car accident and you now a quadruped or a paraplegic or something like that. Quadriplegic. That's what I was looking for. You know, broken neck, and then you don't have any movement and stuff. You know, that's not the promise. The promise is sickness and in health to death do us part. However, if and it's like this: if the person has the same foundation, it's based upon the things in the Bible, then it doesn't matter what situation happens. You have the ability to resolve these things as long as you follow the model that God sets. The issue comes about when the person that you're married to is not in the same or with the same foundation, because they're just going to do the worldly thing. They're going to do what they think is right, because they don't have the same foundation for making their decisions and stuff. And that's where it gets difficult. And that's where passages in the Bible talk about how if your spouse leaves you because of your faith, then you know there are steps to take regarding that. You know, marriage relationship's hard. There are a lot of the situations that are very challenging, very difficult, and there's not an answer for everything, but there are guidelines, and it's a matter of looking and seeing what the scriptures actually say with regards to these guidelines. You know, how do we deal with this situation? You know, every relationship is difficult. Every relationship is different. Every couple has those moments, right? And it's just part of being. It's just part of relationships. Just part of. Doesn't matter if it's your best friend. My best friend and I, we came to blows several times. There were times where we were really close. There are times where we were not. But as far as like mental situations, stuff like that, I mean, it just goes back to the idea, you know, better or worse, sickness and in health, till death do us part. That was the promise, you know, and so we have to do our best in that situation. But if they're not Christians, what do? You do the best you can, and if they decide to leave, not much you can do about that. I don't know, does that help? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mental illness is something that is very challenging to deal with. Not just that, but physical disabilities are very, very challenging to deal with. But the promise is till death do us part. And just because, let's say for example, my wife gets into a car accident and then she's in a situation where she can't walk anymore, or she can't even use everything from the neck down. Does that mean that I can end our relationship? Absolutely not. I would be a horrible, horrible person if I were to do that. Because the promise that I made is not in health. It's in sickness and in health, richer or poor. Doesn't matter if I lose my job, doesn't give her the right to end our relationship, right? Just because I can't provide for the family. We have to do what we can as a team. We are a team working together to accomplish what God has challenged us with. And because of the fact that we're going through this right now means we can handle it, right? It's going to be challenging, but we can handle it because we're going through this. We know we can handle it because we're going through this. Does that make sense?